All right. Hello and welcome back to another installment in the Mechantress audio deconstruction series. I'm your host, Chris Parker, and today we're going to be looking at the charge attack, I suppose. I've got it labeled as Bum Rush, but I believe the official name is the charge attack, and it goes like this. So, continuing on with her attacks and otherwise design theme being based around trains. All of the boss attacks, all of the enemy attacks, everything happens in a sequence of 3 animations: prep, tell, and end. The prep is just the first part of it, and then the tell is the middle piece, which is designed to be able to loop as much as we want for the adjustments of timing and stuff like that. And then the end is the actual, finishing point. So this is the prep section of this Bum Rush attack, or tackle, I suppose, if you will. And right away, the train elements of this are pretty obvious. We'll go down one line at a time here. Just threw in a little bit of classic 8-bit white noise. Pull in the white noise and then just cut the lows out and then throw the crusher on it. Something I love to try to throw into a bunch of different types of sounds is just old, retro elements of it when it's appropriate, especially in like fire sounds and stuff like that. When thinking about how to design this and keeping to the thematic elements of it, she's got a flame that shoots up out of her hat. So ultimately, and I probably said this in one of the other videos, but it's been a minute, so you're going to hear it again. Effectively, she's like half machine, half human. And so this is kind of like, with the fire shooting out of the hat, it's ultimately like the coming to life of an internal fire of sorts, I suppose, if you want to look at it that way. And this is just heavy metal debris and dirt unloaded onto the ground, which is quite the specific library element. Shortened, and then I added just some OTT to it, so without that it's just less, not a lot going on here. This was, I think, earlier in the production of the game for me, so a lot of this stuff really is just like well chosen library sources with a little bit of effects on it. I find that like stacking a lot of effects can really pull the fidelity out of something, and I like to have everything have a lot of weight and clarity to it, and then you keep adding effects and it sort of gets thin and it becomes kind of artifacty and muddy in a way. And so finding a good source and adding a tiny bit of effects works a lot better for me than stacking it with effects, especially in a situation where you're dealing with like mechanical elements, big heavy machinery and stuff like that. And this doesn't have any effects on it at all. That's just part of a train, I imagine. Yeah, series of chuffs. And so all of that together fits like the initial triggering of this attack. And then we have this. Love the bell. Love the train crossing bell. I had that in the melee attack. And it just fits this whole theme really, really well. Not much for effects on this either. OTT for just give it a little bit extra punch and clarity, and then reverb for the tail. More steam from steam trains. Not much for effects on this either. A delay that never even starts. I guess I just decided to have that. It was probably on there for, well, let's see what happens, actually. I don't remember why. Oh yeah, so I used the pitch shift delay on that, but you can tell by using that delay, it changes like the whole characteristic of the sound. It has more of an artifacty sound. It has, in this particular instance, it has a pitch build, but it ruins the train aspect of it almost completely. And this is one that I probably outlined, I think, in the phase transition video. I pulled the sound of some car turbo down off of YouTube because I really, really love the way that turbos, when they spool up, they build so much intensity. You'll probably, if you're not familiar with turbos specifically, you'll hear them a lot in like diesel trucks and big like semis and stuff. That high whine that comes when they take off. It's a turbine that spins up based on exhaust flow gases building up compressor wheel, and it's, you know, that's a topic for a different video, but it just does such a great job of like really building the what's about to happen. Not much for effects here either, just pulled a little bit of this high spot out. Another chuffing sound. You know, it could be argued maybe that these is a little bit too many of the same type of thing, like this one and this one and this one. Find the difference between those 3 tracks, but I think I probably left this one in because it pitches up pretty nicely, and the others don't really do that, so it does still serve a purpose. And this is, you know, once again, there's no effects on this at all. It just has like an in-item pitch build on it, which is like a speed-based pitch build instead of just a pitch shifter change. And this is all part of a design style that I use for any sort of build up on an attack, that like it builds up to a point where you can, you know, you build your energy and then you release the energy. It's really good so people can use the audio to make determinations about what is going to happen and when. So all of those tracks together. So now we're into the tell aspect of this sound. I used this same thing again. Actually, these are just 2 tracks that are left over from the prep, because it's the same animation twice. It just doesn't need all of that initial burst to go with it. So if you just take those 2 bits out of this and do this, it doesn't even run longer. It's honestly just totally duplicates. And then there's the dash, which is actually part 3 of 4. So despite the prep tell end sequence that I mentioned earlier, this one is actually broken into 4 parts, likely just due to certain elements like this dash specifically, for example, where the prep is that initial big burst, and then you've got the tell, which is the part that could loop with the feet kicking and the head, you know, the fire and whatever, that loopable bit. Then there's this actual transition element that happens before the final part of the sound. So that's kind of just how these things get broken down sometimes. But this is the actual charge element that is broken down in such a way that the ultimate length of this track that I made to go with this is ultimately long enough that she will never run for a longer amount of time than this sound actually operates. So I didn't need to worry too much about building a loop here, but I could have, based on the longer element of this, which we'll get to in a second. So the actual charge starts with this wonderful steam whistle, keeping in line with the theme. And this particular track, once again, not a ton for effects. Here's a pitch that never actually ended up getting any changes on it. Doesn't need to exist. Then you've got ring mod to add a little bit of fuzz to it. I like the crunchy sort of tremolated element of that more. And then OTT for clarity, beef, that whole classic business. And then we have more train off in the distance somewhere. Once again, OTT and reverb. Like, so many of these tracks just don't have a ton of effects on them. And then this is the part that technically could have just looped for all effectively ever. In this particular example, I matched this length with the animation that I've pulled. That, you know, just a train going by, no effects. And in this one, fantastic sound. I really like that a lot. There's so much power and then the, you know, the rise and the build up in that as well. I think, let's see if I can you go away? Is that a thing that happens? There you go. And that's got a little bit more of an effect to it. That's just pretty basic train passing. sound, but then beef up the volume and then to put a pitch from bottom to top. Love it. But otherwise, no effects. Put all that group together. We'll do the tell and the charge in one. And so she'll run around on that all over the place. And then the final bit of this is the actual impact at the end. Because the end of this is sort of a, I believe actually at one point, let's see. Yeah, so this is an interesting piece of this actually, because this charge attack, initially, the design eventually got changed, but initially it was sort of like a hit and elbow kind of move. And so it would do damage. And so it has all these extra impact layers. So I'm going to leave them in here just for grins. But ultimately what happened with this attack is that she just stops. So I'll do the impact stuff and then I'll show the normal version. So that's probably still in there because it's just a stopping. But this is a little tiny bit of an impact there. This first one, from an effects perspective, just transient controller, pulled that all off. Smooths out the front of that just a little bit. This doesn't have any effects. This is just actually just a flamethrower sound right at the front. Soft but heavy. I use this one all the time. Just a natural disaster is what it says. Earthquake, impact, crack. I have several of these. I use it all the time. It's such a great little sweetener for adding, weight and stuff to an impact. This is interesting. This is actually dropping a car onto the ground from a meter in the air. And once again, it's still sort of within the theme of how the design for this character went, in that it's a car dropping onto concrete. So, the mechanical element is there, the impact element is there. Another track with no effects. And I'm not necessarily stating that, the best sound design is done without effects. A lot of it is just this particular instance didn't really need a lot of effects in the way that I made this. But there are plenty of effects to come in these videos, especially once we get to the chaos enemies. Yep, just a little more train. Probably copied it from the previous animation piece. Nice big steam blast. Yeah, I didn't end up using that track. This one here. Yeah, train rolling up, stopping, brakes squealing. What else could you need? That's how trains stop. That's what they sound like. Yeah, and this is something I just copied out from the other project, from the transition, because she throws her gun up at the end. Just a little finisher. And so this is what it sounds like with the full impact. And yeah, and then the version that ended up staying would probably be, I think I ended up pulling a little bit more high out of this last piece for the final version. Or it didn't translate into Fmod the same way. That happens sometimes too. So now, with all of those in place, we've just got our 3 events here in Fmod. Yeah, I mean, you can see how long that lasts compared to how long it could possibly last. So it's longer than any point in the animation would be. And then that's the finisher. And we'll head over to Unity to show this off. I don't have access to Spine anymore, so I can't show how I added the animation tags to the animation itself, to the character itself for animations, but you can probably use your imagination on how that goes. So within this visual prefab here, I just made my own object, create empty, and then named it. And that's just a nice, from an organizational perspective, that's just where I stuck all of the audio. So when it comes to the tackle, you can see all of the elements of it are over here. So yeah, prep, nothing special here. Attached, here's the spine tag, here's the event itself. Some of these, the interrupt self one, that is effectively like, if something is going to happen twice, do you want it to interrupt itself to start again, to be able to start again? And for the tell, the answer is yes, because she does the foot thing twice. So start and then interrupt and then start again. And then this one here, the dash, that is the Tackle 2 dash. Imagine that. Naming convention is really nice when you get things all lined up. Stop sound and animation. That's basically like this one's going to be, like I said, longer than it would ever have been in the animation. So I just said, like, when she's done running, stop playing it. And then at the end, nothing special here either, just the ending piece of it. And that, as far as Fmod and implementation and all that stuff is concerned, a pretty straightforward way of building this character. But that's probably all. If you have any questions, by all means, let me know in the comments. And hopefully I will keep doing this series with a little bit more frequency than once every 6 months. And I'm going to definitely dive into more implementation videos too, especially as it gets into more of the complicated elements of the game, especially things like the waterfall system and the fire system for like how the overworld, you know, is all technically flammable. Big voice count management problem there. That one took a little bit of figuring out what to do on how to manage that, because, you know, if you get one voice or whatever, 2 or 3 voices per fire, it doesn't take long before the game is totally silent. So that'll come eventually, but I'm going to finish this Mechantress series first. She has a summon and a shotgun and death. I'm not sure if I'll do all of them, but I'll probably at least do the death. I don't know. It's interesting. But if you want to hear all of them, see all of them, let me know. Don't see why not. And that'll do it.